naughty by nature.
Welcome back to the latest edition of the Bebo Knows Podcast, Podcast 85. Happy Kunk Day, happy Nice Day, 6/9/16 for you here today. I am welcoming a new guest to the podcast, Spraguer. You can find him on Twitter @_, it's just one underscore Spraguer, correct?
It is, yeah.
Well, welcome to the podcast, Spraguer. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
And as I do with any new guests, I'd like to have you introduce yourself from a gambling perspective, how you got started, any memorable moments that stand out in your betting career, your approach to betting, your potentially your biggest degenerate bet, things like that. So however you want to introduce yourself, feel free to take it away.
Sure, thanks. I guess I got started probably mostly the same way as most of your guests kind of describe, with, March Madness pools and NFL pick'em stuff and like parlay cards in school and that kind of thing. In addition to that, there's like the government-run sports betting that we have in Canada. The odds are terrible. It's like -125 each way, and you have to play parlays. But that was kind of my first look into sports betting, really. I don't know, like memorable moments. I'm not sure. I think losses tend to be more memorable than wins. But
yeah.
When I was thinking about, I knew you'd ask the question. I was thinking about it. I think the Game 7 of the 2014 World Series was pretty great with the Giants and the Royals. That was 2014.
Yep.
That was pretty good. I was pretty heavy on the Giants in the series, and that worked out well. It was pretty exciting.
Okay. And obviously you might not be as thrilled about how the Royals finished you guys off last year, but we can go more into that a little later here. But I know I would say that your focus seems to be, at least from what I gather on what you talk about on Twitter the most, is baseball. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's definitely accurate. It's it's not the only sports betting that I do, but it's the only sports betting I'm any good at.
Okay. So like if anyone's looking for advice from you on anything, like don't listen to anything except for baseball.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's fair.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we'll touch base on some of the baseball topics here that I brought up, because I haven't really gone over much baseball since I came back with the podcast here. So as far as your some general questions from a baseball perspective, what aspects of baseball make it your best sport betting wise?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's just that there's kind of these discrete matchups, right? Like it's kind of simple to figure out, the relationship between how good each player is and then how good the team's going to be, right? Because the game is kind of broken down into these discrete pieces, right? And the path, to get from how good the players are to what's the chance that the team that those players are on is going to win this game is fairly well defined. You can figure it out, or at least I can figure it out. But I couldn't do the same for other sports where how those things relate to one another aren't so clear, right? Like even if I had a way to strip out all the noise and figure out how good a football player was, I still wouldn't have any idea how to kind of build the strength of the team based on the aggregate of the strength of all the players, because so much of what they do is independent or is interdependent on each other.
Sure.
Whereas in baseball, it's like these kind of the pitcher and hitter matchup, right? And so I think that kind of that path between that path between knowing how good the players are and knowing what the likelihood is of those players winning the game, I think is much more clear. And with baseball too, I mean, there's tons of like publicly available research, and that's accessible, that's intellectually accessible. Like even as someone who's not a math person, and I'm not, it's still fairly easy to understand. And there's new innovation, new stuff coming all the time, and every time something new comes out, it's an opportunity to kind of integrate that into the model and continue to build. And I mean, for me, that makes it simpler than other sports.
Okay, so you mentioned something about a model. Now, I would imagine for anyone that's really serious about this, at least from what I gather, just talking to a lot of smart people here on Twitter, that I feel like in order to maximize any kind of edge that you want, I would imagine that having a model is well, obviously an efficient model, not just any model, but an efficient model would be a crucial key in that in getting that edge. Would you agree with that or disagree?
Well, yeah, but I think the key is, like you're saying, for it to be an efficient model, right? And so, like if I tried to build a model in some other sport and I didn't know things about that sport, then just having it, putting all the terrible things that I know and making one super terrible model wouldn't get me anywhere. Like it's all based on the quality of the information that you put in, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean you have to know what matters and why it matters in order for it to actually work.
Exactly.
So you mentioned matchups like batter versus pitcher, and I know that you'll often see people quote those, and there's usually very, very, very small sample sizes. And I don't know where you stand on this. I'm not sure if I've seen your stance on that. I assume that would be one of the would that be one of the misconceptions you think of people like trying to value that data, or do you actually find some value in that data?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't even look at it. I don't think you can. Well, there's something about this in the book, called the book MGL and Tango and the other guy Dolphin. There's in the book about batter pitcher matchups and just the size of sample that you would need for it to mean anything. I think you might be able to get a little bit of information about how a batter does in certain environments or against pitchers of a certain type, but that such and such a hitter is 8 for 20 off of this pitcher over his career, so he's a 400 batter now, and that's the expectation. That's ridiculous. Nobody should pay any attention to that.
Okay. No, I figured that's where you would come on that side of the fence. So, I wanted to get into that before other misconceptions. So, as far as misconceptions that you see, either on Twitter or just maybe interacting with people on a daily basis about betting, what misconceptions about do you see spouted from folks who bet baseball?
I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of them are kind of rooted in the same thing, which is overrating recent performance. And I don't mean like recent performance, like this pitcher did well last week. I mean like an entire year, or even even an entire season when you get to the end of the season, right? So, the first step is in trying to come up with your own price for a baseball game is knowing how good all the players are, and how well a player has played to a certain point in the season is a little bit of evidence about how good they are, but it's not nearly as important as what you knew going into the season, right? I mean, you've got to be able to separate how well the player has played from how good the player is, right? And even there's some good publicly available projection systems that update in season, and even those ones tend to integrate in season data too aggressively, in my opinion.
Okay.
Right? So I think that you really have to take into consideration the long term, like looking backward and the aging curve and how the player is done in according to particular things that are signs of things to come. But how well a player has played so far this year is something people talk about all the time, and it's not meaningless, but it's close, right? it's close to meaningless.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. So I would say, based on what you're saying, that would probably be the biggest mistakes that you probably see bettors making if they're. I mean, obviously, a very small sample size in any sport is going to be deceiving. But I mean, with baseball, I don't know. You could get caught up in some of these. There's so many numbers to look at that you could really, kind of get lost in them. So, are there any other big mistakes that you see bettors make that are?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to know exactly what bettors are doing, except, well, I mean, most of the things that you hear people talking about on, in detail on Twitter about how they arrived at their bet or whatever. I mean, often any truth, any veracity that you see in that's purely a coincidence anyway. But I mean, I guess one way to figure out what bettors are doing is to think about the market and to look at the prices of games and see how they change throughout the day. And one thing that I think sometimes you can tell is a clear mistake that some people somewhere are making is not properly taking account of lineup changes for a particular day.
Okay.
Right? So you could have, there are certain players that that are really, really good who sit sometimes, and if you do your research, it's predictable when they're going to sit, and you might know ahead of time that before it's announced you can form a pretty solid guess as to whether or not that really good player is going to play that day, and then you'll see so you know that the line's going to move when the lineups get announced, and then the lineups get announced, and it moves a little bit, but not enough, or sometimes too much. But I think one thing that a person could do to gain an edge on the early market, the pre-lineups market, is to try to figure out who's going to play that day. And to do some Google News and figure out how Bochy feels about whether Posey's going to play the next day or whatever, whether it's going to be Jonathan Lucroy's day off or somebody else who's might be really good and have a terrible backup.
Sure, yeah, and I imagine, I'd imagine like the most popular days for a guy to sit, obviously besides a getaway day, would be if just a really terrible matchup for a guy like Kershaw facing a lefty or something like that. I mean, I'd imagine that those are things that you could figure out ahead of time. I mean, I would imagine that in a lot of cases, it's probably priced into the prices somewhat, but maybe not completely, just because the lineup isn't completely known yet. But maybe I'm wrong on that. I don't really know, but that'll just be.
Yeah, no, it's definitely priced in. I'm just saying that if you can do some with a little bit of research, you can maybe do a better job of putting a probability on a certain player playing in that day's game, right? Than what the opening market might have assumed.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. All right. So we'll move on to I guess your nemesis from last year, the Royals. This is a topic that gets a lot of baseball people riled up. It's like the stat geeks versus the traditionalists who talk about all these cliches involving the Royals, and I get a really good kick out of it. It's funny to me, but I know you were on the wrong side of the Royals' luck last year. Your Blue Jays. So from I guess either from a fan perspective or just a better perspective, how can you explain is their success explainable? I mean, I don't know when you go through this from either a fan perspective or a betting perspective. I don't know what goes through your mind when you are losing to a team like this in the playoffs. Like obviously it's a 7-game series and anything could happen, but it's so amusing how polar opposites are on this argument. So
well, I mean the explanation is shit happens, right? Like just because they won doesn't mean that they're good, but just because they've been lucky doesn't mean that they're necessarily bad either. I mean, true talent, they were pretty good in 2014. They were a true talent 500 team, or maybe a little bit better last year. I think this year with the injuries that they've had to Gordon and Moustakas and Perez for a while, and not having Zobrist anymore, this year I think they actually are pretty bad. But at least right now they're going to get healthier, and obviously depends on the matchup and who's pitching. But I mean, there's no. I mean, I think where people run into problems is when they try to ascribe some kind of value, to what it is that they're doing, other than, well, yeah, any orderly system is going to have some outliers, and guess what? They're the outlier. I mean, they're quite a bit worse than both the Astros and the Blue Jays last year, and they beat them both. So in the playoffs, but I mean those are short series. I mean they're bigger. The bigger thing that they overcome, like the bigger example of Royals' luck from last year is them winning the division and making the playoffs. Right? Like I think Cleveland played, was a better true talent team last year. You're seeing that on the field this year, but I think they had better players last year, and depending on how you look at it, actually played better. But certainly the results weren't there for Cleveland. No, I mean I don't think there's any magic to it, and sometimes you'll see articles to say, well, what did we get wrong about the Royals? At the Prospectus or at Fangraphs or somewhere else that puts out projections, and the answer is you didn't. Like, the answer is you correctly determined that they were just okay, and sometimes just okay teams end up winning a lot of games. That's just the nature of it.
I kind of felt that way. I don't know if the data agrees with me or not. I haven't really looked at the advanced stats, but being a White Sox fan, I want to say that their 2005 run was somewhat similar. Like I don't remember them having an overpowering team, but they just quote unquote found a way to win, like the Royals did. I don't know if you remember.
Oh, the White Sox. Yeah, I do remember that. The White Sox were in 2005 were they were pretty fortunate.
Yeah, no, and I'm okay with that. You know what? As a fan, obviously, and I think you can speak to this as a Blue Jays fan. You know, if your team, you know, is really like an 83-win team, you know, parading as a 92-win team that wins the World Series, I don't think you're going to give two shits about, you know, the advanced stats saying that they shouldn't have been, you know, there. I think as a fan, you could probably agree with that.
Oh, I agree completely, and that's why you can't hold, you know, as frustrating as it gets when, you know, when Royals fans apparently, you know, sometimes they seem to want to, you know, ascribe it to positive attributes that their team has that they're winning, but of course they do. They're fans. I can remember, kind of, you know, I was a kid when the Jays won their World Series in 92 and 93. And I can remember realizing years later that, you know, Joe Carter wasn't that good. and that doesn't really taint the memory at all, right? When, you know, when you're a fan, you want good things to happen. Like I'm a Jays fan, and now I'm seeing that Troy Tulowitzki, he's been on the DL for a couple of weeks, and Darwin Barney's been playing. Darwin Barney's pretty bad. He probably shouldn't be on a big league roster, but he's hitting like he's hitting as if he was a Kansas City Royal replacing one of their injured players, right? He's hitting really well, way over his head. And I don't feel like the Jays should have to give any of those wins back that they've gotten while Tulo's been out. So of course, you know, you can't begrudge them anything, but I certainly I would be personally richer if the Royals hadn't done that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So I mean, you said personally richer, so you had some Blue Jays futures.
I did. I think I don't have this in front of me, but I think I was probably heavier on the Astros.
Okay.
Like last year's Astros team, after they made the trades, just true talent-wise, I thought they were just a juggernaut. I was surprised that they lost they ended up blowing their division lead, and I was really surprised when Kansas City was able to come back in that playoff series. But Houston, Kansas City, 2015 playoff series is a series designed specifically to take my money, and it did.
Just funneled it right into the book. So does it torture you more for when you? I know that some people like can remove themselves now. The more people get involved with betting, I don't know. Some people might withdraw a little bit from their fandom. Do you feel the losses as a fan more than you do the losses of betting?
Yeah, yeah. That's again, like only in baseball is the only sport in which I have a team that I'm a fan of, and it's just because I have been since I was a kid, right?
Yeah.
And I would much rather see the Jays win a game or be successful than win any particular wager.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so I think the last question, like related to the Royals, anyways. Here, as far as teams this year that maybe look like they're the Royals, maybe even the Royals themselves, pulling the most likely to pull a Royals like runoff this year. And But before you answer that, I wanted to say I think you might have introduced me to this, or somebody on Twitter did, looking at the third order win percentage, and I have a feeling I was going to guess that your answer to this was going to be the Texas Rangers, just because of the fact that their third order winning percentage is .500, but they're playing as a 610 bulk club right now. Would my guess there be accurate, or do you have another team in mind for that?
Well, I guess if the question is, I guess which team is most likely to pull the Royals? I mean, maybe the Royals. I mean, only they can kind of be their authentic selves in that kind of disgusting lucky way. But no, I mean, the Rangers are a pretty good guess, and I know I mentioned the AL West race last year. I didn't think the Rangers had any business pulling out ahead of the Astros last year, and they did. And I don't have the 2015 third orders in front of me, but I'll bet you if I did, I'd see that the Astros were. Yeah, there we go. The Astros third order win percentage in 2015 was like 100 points higher than that of the Rangers.
Okay. I'm not aware of everything behind the third order win percentage. So if for people who might not know that, including myself, if you could explain a little bit what that entails. I believe it strips out the some of the luck factors and also adjusts for your competition, but I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah. I mean that's the idea. So okay. I think I forget the order in which it does this, but it applies the Pythagorean expectation, right? So I think the first order win percentage is your Pythagorean expectation. So based solely on runs scored and runs allowed.
Okay.
And then I think the next order is based on how many. It's your Pythagorean expectation based on how many runs you should have scored and allowed, given the more basic elements of your offense. How many hits, how many walks, how many extra base hits did you hit, and did you give up? Right? They can add them all up and assign linear weights to each of them and determine how many runs you should have scored and how many you should have allowed based on the actual event. So that kind of strips out the effects of the sequencing or clumping of the events, right?
Okay.
And then the third order, I believe, is the strength of schedule, right? Just correcting for the quality of competition.
Okay. Okay.
And so the third order, there's still measures of how well the team has played, but rather than a forward-looking projection or rather than an attempt to really look at true talent. But I think it's a better if you look at third order winning percentage, it's at least gives you a better idea of the true talent of the team than their actual winning percentage.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So as far as anything else from baseball this year, from a fan or betting perspective, anything grabbing your attention, anything notable that you've noticed?
Not, I don't know, not, I mean, there's a few things that I've been, surprised by. Glad to see Cleveland doing well. It seems like every year they have the talent to do well, and then something happens where it ends up going poorly. But look, there's particular teams that aren't performing the way that I thought they would, but I don't necessarily want to talk about all those.
No, I totally understand.
I will say though, in a very obvious way, that the Blue Jays should be hitting more. but they should be hitting more. But some of the star players are underperforming, and then there's a couple of real sinkholes in the lineup that are dragging them down. So I guess that's one that I feel comfortable talking about.
Okay. When I was navigating the Baseball Perspective site before I left work today, I was actually shocked to see that out of the AL teams that the Indians have the highest World Series winning percentage in the AL at 13.2, and the only team actually higher than them, you could probably guess, is the Cubs.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was fascinated by that, especially with having Indians 25-1 from before the beginning of the year. So, all right. So
there's something else, I guess, that's not in any way a secret, is that the Cubs are insanely great.
Oh yeah. It's fun. I used to live in Chicago. I live outside Chicago now, but it's a lot more fun when at least one of the teams is doing well. Obviously, the Sox are kind of sinking off, and I don't think anybody with a clue was expecting them to play as well as they were at the beginning of the year and maintain that. So I don't know. I'm not expecting much from them. So the Cubs, at least, are going to hold up the Chicago end of things here, and I don't know. I used to be one of those people that hated the Cubs just because I'm a Sox fan. You have to pick one side or the other in this town. But at this point, I'd like to see them go far and try to do something. But we'll see how that goes. All right. So the last baseball topic here is one that I enjoy watching people, especially in Seaville, talk about, is Joe Peta. And I'll say a disclaimer, and it'll probably get me shunned, but I did enjoy his book when I read it a couple years ago. But maybe, like I said here in the outline, I don't know if that's due to my lack of betting-focused books I've read in my life, just because I've tried to find gambling books, just regular stores, and I might need to actually search harder to find some of those. But what gets you and others riled up about him? Because I think I've seen you talk about him. I don't know if it's just the way that people, I don't know if idolize him is the right word, but maybe you could go into a little detail about that.
Yeah, in terms of what gets me kind of riled up about Peta, I would say probably that I'd agree with you in a certain sense that I enjoyed the book when it wasn't making me seething mad, but there were parts of it that were enjoyable, and frankly, look, it's a book about baseball betting. So how could I possibly justify not reading it, right? So I did, but of course, my copy has a lot of LOL and what the hell jotted down in the margin. But I don't know. I think in terms of getting riled up, it's the whole cluster luck thing. He claims to have invented what he calls cluster luck, which is really just what's the effect of the sequencing of events, right? So I know when we talked about third order win percentage earlier, we talked about how that's kind of designed to strip out the effects of sequencing. Well, third order win percentages have been around for a lot longer than Peta's book, and it's so kind of basic and elemental to baseball research. Like it's almost trite to say, well, I invented that we should strip out the effects of sequencing, where we've had offensive metrics since, when I was a kid, my dad came back from the States and got me came back from a trip to the States and gave me a copy of a book by Palmer and Thorne, Pete Palmer, and in there, it described a formula for linear weights, right? And this is just, you take how many doubles the guy hit, and you gave him a certain amount of runs for the doubles and triples and walks and home runs and all these other events that happen, and you ascribe a value to each one, and then you say, well, okay, how good is this player? How good is this team, right? I mean, and that's kind of a basic building block of everything that you see in baseball analysis, sabermetrics or whatever for like 30 years. And all of a sudden he's like, guys, I invented this thing called sequencing. So I don't know. I mean, it's just really kind of disingenuous, and because he didn't invent anything. It's like if I came out tomorrow and said, like, I invented the wheel and there's cars driving around me everywhere. Like, yeah, we did that a long time ago. It's part of this bigger thing that we've built now, right? That part of it's frustrating. And I guess the other part is just he's whatever. He's a little bit smarmy. Like I find his tone to be off-putting because he doesn't really you can tell that he really believes in his own success and doesn't really consider the possibility that it's that the success that he had or claims to have had betting on baseball is a fluke, right? He doesn't consider that possibility, and I'm not saying that it is a fluke. I'm not saying that he doesn't know what he's doing. Although based on the book, I certainly would disagree with some of the stuff that he does, but I'm just saying that he doesn't even. He's saying, like, I just started doing this thing. I bet these many games. This was the outcome. Therefore, I'm awesome, right? Like, he doesn't at any point say, well, this is the likelihood that I could have arrived at this outcome by chance,
okay.
Right? Which, obviously, he's writing a book about how great he is at betting on baseball. I guess it's only natural that that the book doesn't consider that, but it's a very real possibility, right? And it's something that people should think about, right? Because there's in academic research there's publishing bias, right? So
sure.
People try to do things and somebody flukes into success, and that's the person that gets published, right?
Yep.
So then value gets ascribed based on the fact that the person's published, but all it means is that he was the one who survived, so he happened to write a book about it. But I don't know. I'm not saying that he completely doesn't know what he's doing, but there's definitely a couple of things that that he's just aggressively wrong about, and the claiming to have invented this concept of stripping out the effect of sequencing is, I don't know, it's just kind of bothersome.
Yeah, I haven't read the book in a while, so I don't remember. I don't remember his exact words with this. I know I remember him mentioning cluster luck, but did he try to I don't know, not patent it, but did he try to say that he ascribed that word to things?
Yeah, I've heard him say different things at different times. I don't have the book right in front of me, but it's his concept, he says, and then at other times I've heard him say, well, that he coined the term, right? But it's important to understand that cluster luck is not a thing. If you have access to the Fangraphs team level stats, I mean, everybody has access to that, but if you look at Fangraph's team level stats or Baseball Prospectus third order win percentage or any of that, those are much more complicated and accurate ratings of teams in which the idea that we strip out the effect of sequencing is totally subsumed, right? Like that's a small part of this bigger thing. Sure. It's not helpful in any way to pull that out and say, aha, look at this.
Okay. All right, well, to get off the rant here, but for literature that you would recommend to someone that's looking to get serious about gambling, I personally myself haven't read too much sports betting wise. So, if you have any suggestions, what are some that you would recommend to people? Whatever it might be, whether it be specific to sports betting or maybe building a model or something like that.
Yeah, I really don't, Brian. I really don't have a betting book recommendation. I know I mentioned earlier the book by Tango and MGL and Andrew Dolphin. That's that's great, and that kind of just goes through a lot of different research ideas in baseball and has chapters on platoon splits and leveraging relievers and batter pitcher matchups and stolen base rates, and it just kind of takes. I think if you hadn't read the book before, even though it's old, it's probably 10 years old now. If you hadn't read it before, it would be difficult to read it and not understand baseball better afterward.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just looking at my copy here. Yeah, it's 2007, so it's almost 10 years old.
Okay. So I think that wraps up the baseball topics here. The other thing that I wanted to get into before we get into some listener questions here is the thing that I kind of recognized you first about on Twitter, like the thing that stood out to me, and maybe it's because your name's on the top of this, is the Spraguer's Tout Chart, and I have the version 2.0, so I assume that this has been a work in progress for a little while at least. So if you could explain the inspiration behind the flow chart, I'm sure I don't know if it's fairly simple or if there's any complexity to it, but feel free to share that.
Well, I think it's pretty straightforward. I mean, the idea the idea is that it's categorically impossible for it to be a good idea for someone to buy pigs. And I don't know, I guess a lot of times, you'll see on Twitter that criticisms of one tout or another because they don't have good records out there that are publicly available, or they they do stupid things like selling 3 games of the year within a 2-month span or something like that, and we'll say, well, you're bad because you do these things, you sell these games of the year, or you don't have publicly available records or whatever the thing is. But I'm an anti-tout strict positivist, meaning I guess that they're all bad, right? And it's because if you kind of build this tree, right? That's what the tout chart really is. You can kind of see that, like, whether if the tout bets his picks, well, then that just leads you to reasons why you shouldn't buy them. And if he doesn't bet his picks, well, that leads to other reasons why you shouldn't buy them. And I think I was not going to go through the whole chart, but there's only so many options. Like either the tout doesn't have the confidence or the money to bet the picks himself, which is a terrible sign, or the tout is betting the picks, and either the market doesn't care or he's front running the clients, right? Like there's just no. I think that there's no case that I can think of in which it's a good idea for an individual to buy picks, but I think it is possible that there are some touts that are not as culpable as others, meaning that I think there are some who just might not understand that they're screwing people over. Like you could at least conceive of somebody who's maybe they've had success over a short period of time and are fooled into thinking that that they have positive EV information to sell. So they think that, but they're also naive enough to think that selling picks is the best way to monetize like winning gambling information. And winning gambling information is essentially a license to print money. Like if you had that information, you definitely wouldn't sell it. So I mean, I think I think it is possible that they're not all culpable, because I think it's possible that some pick sellers are just naive enough to think that what they're putting out there is good, and that they haven't thought it through enough to think that, well, wait a minute, if it is so good, why am I putting it out there? But the truth is that in those cases they shouldn't be putting it out there because it's not positive EV and it's not good. Nobody who had positive EV information nobody's smart enough to have good plays to put out there would be dumb enough to put them out there, right?
And I agree with that.
And then I think too that there might be, and this one's a little trickier, but I used a term before in conversation with somebody else, but there's a kind of tout that I think about like an aging prize fighter who can't really do it anymore, but can't stop themselves. So I don't know. Maybe Fezzik fits into this. I'm not sure, but I think there might be some touts pick sellers who had an edge at one time. When this was easier, they had an edge, and they don't anymore. And cognitive dissonance set in, and they have to be able to tell themselves that they can make money gambling, and so they make money by selling picks, because if they don't, and if instead of selling their picks they just keep betting them, then they force themselves to accept the realization that they've lost their edge, right? And it's much more graceful to kind of realize you've lost your edge in the way that someone like Alan Boston has.
Yeah,
where he just kind of gets all sad and accepts it, but he doesn't go out and start turning picks, and that's because he has the strength to realize what's happening, right? Whereas I think, and if it's somebody who's again, the cognitive dissonance is kind of causing them to turn to pick selling because their psyche just can't reckon with the idea that they've lost their edge. It's hard to say that that person is a scamming asshole like the rest of them, but they their customers are victims nonetheless, right? Because it's bad information that they're putting out there. So, but I think those kind of that kind of narrow ethical green space for touts, right? Where what they're doing is wrong, but maybe they're not quite as culpable for those couple kinds of touts. I think the vast majority are just out and out scammers. But in any case, it doesn't matter, because even the ones who maybe are slightly less culpable because they either can't control or don't know that they're scamming, the people who buy their picks still shouldn't buy them. It's never a good idea to buy picks, full stop. And that's that was kind of the point of the chart.
Okay. And when did you actually come up with this? Has this always been something in your mind?
No. I don't know. I'm sure there was a discussion on Twitter that might have inspired it in the moment, but I don't.
Okay.
I don't specifically recall.
Okay. I don't even know if I need to ask this question, but I'm just going to ask it anyway because I wrote it. But is there even a single tout you have? And I had to put this in quotes. Seen do things the right way. That you could ever even remotely recommend? I mean, I think I know the answer to that, but I'll let you answer it anyway.
Well, no. I mean, not that I've ever seen, and for the reasons that I've just described, right? I mean, there may be, I don't know, maybe there are relationships, business relationships where, one person comes up with the win probabilities or the lines or whatever, the picks, and sells them to like another party who understands the risks and is more comfortable with the risk and sells it at the true value, and everything's on the up and up. But that's not the reality of the available touts out in the market. So
yeah.
I don't think there's anyone that you could just Google pick seller or tout and that it's a good idea to buy their picks. I don't think that there's such a thing as the right way.
Okay. I had to put that in quotes, obviously. The question I always forget to ask, this is one that I meant to ask as a recurring question with the guests, but since this topic came up, I figured I'd bring it up. Bellevue Dog had a question that I've always wanted to ask every guest here, and it was if by federal law you had to pay one tout for picks, who would it be and why? Do you care to answer that?
Well, I mean, I don't know, the cheapest one. I mean, all of the information is worthless. So the one that would cost me the least amount of money to buy the pick, I guess.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So nothing for amusement purposes or anything like that.
No. Well, yeah. I guess put it that way. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe. I mean, if I thought that there was a pick seller upon whom I could inflict some measure of economic damage by buying the pick and then just releasing it, I would do that. Right? Like if I thought that in some way I could hurt a pick seller by releasing their pick right before they made all their sales for the Super Bowl or something, I might find some personal value in that and go that way.
Okay, fair enough. All right, we'll go into our listener questions here. Some of these are just betting, baseball related. Some of them are other things, but Sizzling Sports. I'm guessing you guys have conversations about this before because he specifically mentions best late 80s, early 90s quite a bit here. You mentioned best late 80s, early 90s rapper and or group, rap song, and rap album. So what do you have in mind for that?
I don't know. I mean, I thought about that question. I think as far as the group goes, Naughty by Nature. I like all their stuff, and I did when it came out. Everybody everybody tends to think that the music that was popular when when they kind of came of age is the best music, and that's probably why. If I had to guess, I would say that Sizzlin' and I are pretty close to the same age. The other one for rap album, would be this is a little bit earlier than that, but License to Ill, the Beastie Boys. I played the hell out of that one just over and over and over.
Hey, did you have the actual record, or did you have like the cassette or tape, or CD or what?
I think I had the tape first, and then it might have been my first CD.
Okay.
But I had the tape first, the cassette, yeah.
Okay, yeah, my first CD was some Aerosmith Greatest Hits, I think, Big Ones or something like that. I don't know. I was like 12, so whatever. Don't judge me. Don't at me. I think one of the first cassettes I got was MC Hammer. I don't remember which one it was, but yeah, that's all I really remember about like the late 80s, early 90s as far as rap goes, or at least what kind of music I had cassette-wise. So, all right. So I know Peasy's probably going to be listening to this, but so that's specifically why I want to mention that he asked about 5 questions and you crossed 3 of them out. So I have to mention that because I know that's just going to inspire a bourbon-filled rant. So one of the questions you didn't cross out that he asked was ranking the MLB Union Chiefs in order of what they did for the game. So I don't know if you've given that much thought, but how would you rank them?
Yeah, I mean, well, there aren't that many, but mainly because Marvin Miller did it for so long. But Marvin Miller is he's the best. He's a personal hero of mine, and if you look at the work that Marvin Miller did, I mean, the work that he did, he ended the reserve clause where players were basically, they basically had to serve their team as long as that team wanted them, and his actions led to the bringing about of free agency, and also kind of laid the basis for the union's repudiation throughout the years of salary caps, right? I definitely think that any ranking of MLBPA union chiefs or sports union chiefs has to start with Marvin Miller, and Donald Fear followed along in his footsteps, and he did. He kind of resisted the whole salary cap idea again with the strike and the lockout in 1994 and early in 1995. I don't know. There's a thing that one of the reasons I didn't cross out that question from PC. One was because, of course, it's important to be able to shout out Marvin Miller, but also that it's gone a weird place now because for the first time they don't have a lawyer. They don't have an experienced labor lawyer as their leader, right? They've got Tony Clark, former player, and I think it's pretty well established that sports unions do better with lawyers than with players, right? Like Donald Fear probably couldn't hit a fastball, but he was probably the better union leader, and Tony Clark. I some of the things that he said are just like bizarre. Like he was asked in this offseason. I mean, they're going into negotiations soon. He was asked in this offseason about the revenue split between players and owners, and he's saying, well, it's as close as 50-50 as it's ever been, was what he answered to the media. It became a story back in the offseason. But the truth is, like, the owners have a much greater share now. Like all the research is out there shows that, and the players used to have a bigger share, and it's slipping. And the idea that we know this because there's publicly available research, and also because people like Scott Boras are out there saying, no, the players are getting screwed. The players need a bigger share of the pie. And for the union leader, for Tony Clark, to be out saying, well, we're not really concerned about that because it's split 50-50, is crazy. Strategically, he should be beating the drum and laying the groundwork for more money coming back to the players. And even if it wasn't a problem, he should be saying it's a problem.
Okay.
But yet it is a problem, and he's saying that it's not. And then too, and even recently, like even during this season, there's been a couple times when players get suspended for PEDs, and then they appeal, and then some players kind of break rank with the union and will complain about the process that's in place. Like Justin Verlander will tweet a complaint that D. Gordon gets to appeal his suspension. Like, how can the union stand for this? Well, why is somebody not telling Justin Verlander to maybe keep it quiet, because the union will stand up for him when he needs it.
Sure.
Right? And I can't imagine that in Marvin Miller's era that kind of anti-employee expression from within the union would be tolerated. But it's led by a player now, and a former player. So players like players, and whatever a player says goes. I don't know. It just the contrast is pretty stark, and I do worry that baseball will become more owner dominated going forward in the way that the other sports are.
Okay. All right. And the other question that you didn't cross off from him was one of the less serious ones here. The outside of Yost and Moore, what manager and GM's wife should definitely leave him?
Yeah, I don't know about manager. Like it's hard to say. Like managers do little things all the time that don't seem to make sense in terms of lineup construction and how they deploy the bullpen, but you never really know all the factors that they're dealing with to come to those conclusions. I mean, sometimes like Robin Ventura in that Royals series last week, he didn't acquit himself very well, but I don't know. I don't really have an answer for the manager, but for the general manager, I think Dave Stewart's wife should leave him. I think I used this phrase earlier in describing some of Joe Pita's opinions, but the Diamondbacks are just aggressively wrong. Sometimes in the things that they do, right? So, like the Shelby Miller trade was like kind of roundly put upon by the sabermetric media, right? Fangraphs and baseball perspectives. Basically, anybody with a clue was saying that this was a ridiculous trade for the Diamondbacks. They gave up the number 1 overall picks once, and they gave up a pitching prospect, and they gave up Ender Inciarte to the Braves, who center fielder who might on his own be worth more than Shelby Miller, right? In terms of, the years of control and the impact on the field. So, like that trade didn't make any sense, and then they vastly overcommitted to Zach Greinke, and I mean there's a ton of things that they did. They gave a prospect away they traded the prospect to the Braves last year, Toussaint, in exchange for, I think it was Bronson Arroyo, but the point was that they basically sold the prospect, right? It was the prospect and a bad contract for nothing, right? Arroyo's contract. So, I mean, and then when they asked Dave Stewart about it, they said, well, how valuable do you think Toussaint is, and then he cited the bonus money that Toussaint got as a draft pick as his value. Stewart said, well, we know exactly how valuable he is. We just paid him X amount. But he's not. There's tons of surplus value on those prospects. They're worth way more than what they get paid. And he just gave it up. Like it doesn't even, just the way that they built their team doesn't make any sense. The moves that they made don't make any sense. But it's not. They're not even that bad. On the field, they're kind of bad, but they're not terrible. But they could have been so much better if they had just made different moves.
Okay. All right. I think I already had you go on. Well, I guess it wasn't really a rant. I think Sports by John here was wanting more of a rant, but he'll live with that. The realist Dan asked a few questions here. He was wondering if you actually resemble Bochy because at this point he assumes that you are the Canadian him.
I do not resemble Bochy. I don't resemble Bochy in any way.
Okay. How visible to all house guests is your hashtag Big Fucking Check-A-Night? I guess it's some contest that you won years ago.
Yeah. Former. Anyways, I won an NFL Survivor thing, and a former podcast guest of yours sent me as to go along with the prize a large novelty check with Chad Millman's as the watermark, and it's pretty impressive that he managed to get me this check, and it's I don't know, it might be like 3 feet by 6 feet. Like it's a big check.
Nice.
Yeah. It's not very visible because frankly nobody that I know in real life would. I don't care to begin where I'd have to begin to tell the story of the check to anybody that I know in real life.
So it's not visible in any which way.
No.
Damn, that's a little disappointing.
It's cherished, though. It's cherished.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. Yeah. His last question here was a slap fight between yourself and notorious nice guy Dan Hodes, who wins.
I don't know. We both win because there's no slaps. We share some brisket or something. I don't think.
Poutine.
I don't see that one coming to blows. No.
Okay. You drink some Molson. Are you guys? Are you a beer drinker? Canadian beer drinker, or what?
I'm drinking one as we speak, Brian.
Okay, Carf beer.
Not usually. Normally, you've inspired me to go open another one, so that's what I'm doing. And I have to I had to walk to the fridge and make sure I don't get relegated in the Fitbit challenge. I normally drink macro brews just mainly because I find like any kind of light lager is just very easy to drink, and also because they tend to be union made, which is something that's important to me.
Okay. Yeah, I never got the impression that like craft beers were as widely popular as they are, or they seem to be here in the States.
Yeah, they're becoming more and more so. Like there's I mean they're certainly around, but when I travel in the States, I do. It does feel like I see more.
Okay. All right. Let's see. We have a couple more questions here. The numbers don't lie, and I don't know if he was asking what was more likely. Obviously, this is a slightly dated question. I think this is from last week, but Bernie winning the presidency or Blue Jays winning the World Series, and I'm not sure if the context was what you'd rather see or what was more likely, but however, I don't know if you know the context behind that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure the context either. I mean, if it's on probability of happening, I guess the Jays are now more likely to win the World Series than Bernie win the presidency. Although they're neither thing is much more likely than zero. But you know, I in terms of which I prefer to see, I mean, I think you know, it should stipulate that I'm not an American, and therefore no American should care what I think about about the politics in any way. But yeah, I mean, I think I would rather see the Blue Jays win a World Series.
Okay.
But if I lived in the U.S. and it had a more, in the presidency had any kind of direct impact on me, I think that might be flipped.
Okay. And I might be judging this by a small sample size, but I feel like that Canadians, at least the Canadians that I follow on Twitter, seem to give more of a shit about our race than we ever would about any of your political races. Can you explain that at all?
Well, yeah, you're much larger, and we get all of your media here, and of course it doesn't go the other way. Plus, you know, American politics is far more entertaining, right? Like it's at least it has been in this cycle.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I could see that. Okay. Yeah, I mean, because the only reason I even know the Trudeau's name is just because of how much you Canadians, at least the people I follow, bash him. So I think that's the only reason I even know his name. I mean, otherwise I'm going to plead ignorance on knowing anything about Canadian politics. But
I mean, I think that's fine. I don't know. I don't know anything about the politics of other countries that are much smaller than Canada. But I don't know why we would have any expectation that you would know anything about ours.
Fair enough. Okay. All right. The other question that numbers don't lie here had was the most percentage you've lost in a day, month, and a season of MLB betting.
Yeah, I'm not going to answer that, but I mean, clearly, you know, there are swings, right? And some days and weeks are good, and some are bad. Yeah.
You crossed this out. I'm sorry. You crossed this out. So no.
Look closer at the Google Doc, Brian.
I guess. Yeah. Right. Yeah. All right. So the last question that you can't answer here from Nafi was which MLB franchise is sixth in your organizational ranking?
That is, I guess, I don't think he's actually looking for an answer, but that's a pretty clever dig at Dave Cameron and Fangraphs. And they ranked all the organizations a few years ago, and they ranked his favorite team, the Mariners, as number 6, and then they proceeded to be just terrible for 2 or 3 seasons after that. So clever dig with the question, but obviously I think it was rhetorical.
That's fine. Yeah, I guess I didn't know the background behind that, but I felt obliged to ask anyway. So, any final thoughts before we close this up?
No.
Okay.
No. Thanks for having me. I think it was a good discussion.
All right, and before I let you go, I forgot to ask. I always have people on here, give their song for the bumpers on the pod here. Do you have anything in mind that you'd like to begin and end this pod with, or do you want to give it a minute to think about and DM me the song of your choice there?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I wanted to see if I could get an answer from you on the spot there, but I'll let you think about that for a little bit. Spraguer, thanks for joining. You can catch him @_Spraguer, and again, thanks for joining. Good luck for the rest of this baseball season. Enjoy it, and I'll talk to you soon. And everyone, again, thanks for listening.